If you're a heavy metal fan, you had a lot to celebrate this past weekend. There was a ton of albums that came out. We could essentially call this the first big release weekend of the year, and it's like Christmas came early. This is not very typical. And as a result of that wealth and my current seasonal work schedule kicking my backside, I was not able to get to everything. So, Hooded Menace, Portal fans, I apologize, but you guys know about these bands and that these albums should be picked up, so definitely go out and do that. So, I have 5 here that I want to speak about, and this is great for those who perhaps wanted to pick up something aside from Machine Head or Orphan Land over this past weekend, and I can understand why for those who maybe picked up the former and were disappointed. So it's like we haven't done this in a year. Here are 5 recently released albums that you should definitely scope out and investigate. And the first one is sort of the obvious pick. It was the one I was hoping to get to with a full review, and that was Phil Anselmo and the Illegals with Choosing Mental Illness as a Virtue. This album is incredibly angry. If you thought Catharsis was meant to be some sort of rage-filled album where Rob Flynn airs his grievances, this is making that look like Candyland, like Disneyland. This is Phil essentially gnashing his teeth, gnawing away, growling, screaming. There's not a lot of clean singing here, so if you're, very reminiscent to his time in bands such as Down or even the cleaner parts of Pantera, that's not what you're going to get with this. Even if you are into some of his other side projects, this is something that's going to feel a lot different. It has some roots within hardcore punk that incorporate itself with sludge, which slows those riffs down while not descending on the intensity level whatsoever. The compositions are just filled with pure hatred, and Phil is just, it's amazing to me that this man continues to use and utilize these forms and fashions of lyricism and vocalization, considering he is getting up there in age, but he just sounds so angry and so intense. It's something that really cannot be taught, and so he's been writing like a madman. This is an album that it's a pretty cool experiment. However, the only problem that I have with it is that it does get a little tiresome by the end, considering we have a very direct approach with this album. However, fans of Phil Anselmo and fans of this style of music, this very sort of sludgy, very destructive form of, I guess, an underscore of hardcore punk, are going to love this. They're going to really enjoy just how high energy and just how angry this sounds. Now, early in the Tribulation's career, which this is only album number 4, so how early can it really be? The group has already gained a lot of talk for their releases, each feeling a little bit different than the last, and that's a good thing. But considering this is the first time we've reviewed a Tribulation album, down below hopefully is going to share that distinction. Starting as a pure death metal band before adding elements of psychedelic prog and traditional heavy metal, Tribulation's Fourth Dark Symphony boasts a similar bizarre range. However, Down Below harkens vocals that sound like they belong in the Euro black metal scene, while being cascaded by Hammond organ dirge. And really, the mellow black is very clear on the song Nightbound on this album, which may remind some of some late-age Dissection, perhaps, off of their final studio album. Meanwhile, the keyboards come into play and on later tracks such as Lacrimosa and Here Be Dragons, while scattered everywhere else, which drive the longer cuts, the 6 or 7 minute long songs on the latter portion of this album, and make them the songs that deserve real listening. This is something where the second half of this album can be seen and considered as more of the lengthy and very experimental side, the side that perhaps Tribulation fans were starting to really become comfortable with because of their last 2 albums having so much of it. Whereas the first part of this album is a little bit more of that straightforwardness that you would expect perhaps from their first album, only instead of it being in a pure death metal approach, it has that Euro black metal sound. Overall, this is a pretty cool experience, and while it might not be one that was able to sort of captivate as much as the prior 2 experiments have, it may be one that feels like they've instead adopted something that's a little bit more, I guess, conventional, or perhaps have not gone into strange territory nearly as much. There's still just enough in here to really make this album feel unique and feel like they have succeeded in that idea of continuing to morph their sound a little bit more with each passing album. This is one that you should definitely scope up if you are curious in the black metal and really kind of even in the progressive black metal markets one where this is a group that you sort of need to just examine in general, as they have gotten a lot of talk over the past couple of years, and with the release of Down Below, it certainly showcases itself to be pretty well deserved. Let's do a rundown. Watchtower, Duat, Obscura, Yakuza, Gorguts. Yeah, Howling Sycamore, this self-titled release, and really this band is now the link that links all of those bands that I just mentioned together, which is pretty freaking cool. They feature names from each of these bands. Three of them, Watchtower, Duat, and Obscura, are in the main part of the project, while Yakuza and Gorguts get some guest work. And whenever it comes to Obscura, it's Hans Grossman, so you know the drums are just going to be absolutely insane. It's Duat's main man and their main instrumentalization, and Watchtower's vocalist, which Jason McMaster is probably the one thing that's going to seem the strangest part about this project, considering this is one that's really all over the map. There's Dickinson vocal heroics, there's thumping drums, there's mind-melting pattern shifts and solos from both guitar and horn. That's where Yakuza is coming in. This is nothing if not creative as hell. That's the one thing, you know, whether you have any sort of real problem with vocals or anything like that, feeling that they don't really mold together within your first listen, is definitely something that you have to call creative. For those who remember Duat, the chaos and the avant-garde will feel very much like home, with the boombastic drums by Hans Grossman delivering really something that Duat really deserved whenever they were around. You know, if Hans would have worked with them, man, that section would have been just absolutely absurd. Jason is bending rule after vocal rule one with this, and adding another layer to WTF to each and every one of these songs. And again, like I said, from my initial sort of feelers, they have said that this is the most sort of off-putting part of the album. I think this is actually what links everything together. Do you remember Control Denied, for example? Do you remember how Control Denied featured those vocals that felt like they were just a little bit off from what Chuck and the remainder of the band were attempting to really create? Remember how that sort of made that band and that project feel a little bit larger than life and a little bit different, and how it seemed like it was pushing things into an entirely different direction. That's what Howling Sycamore is kind of attempting to do here in 2018. It's just sort of been done before, but this is also one where they made the Control Denied experiment weirder, for example. That's the best way that I can put it. They made that weirder. Check this one out, and definitely go in with a little bit of an open mind with those vocals, considering you want to explore this kind of as purely as possible, and recognize that with the clean vocals being as sort of Dickinson-esque as they are, it's adding something that you perhaps have never heard, or maybe is celebrated in the underground. I don't know, like, something about this just really registered for me as super duper cool. May not be for you, but I still implore you to scope it out. With 4 live soulful musicians in their lineup, In Vain doesn't quite carry the same avant-garde level that that group maybe boasted, but they do carry a trademarked prog death mix into their brand new album, which is entitled Currents. But don't think that that makes them any less adventurous. Currents displays range and wild mood swings within its delivery, but also in its pace. And really this is proven by its in-your-face opener, Seekers of the Truth, which pulverizes you but is quickly met with the cleaner and more prog-laced melodies in a song such as Soul Adventurer, and then gets right into the heathen pride, starting with Blood We Shed. Whenever you transition over to the second half of this 7-song album, Origin gives us black metal vocals over a rich prog death tapestry to remind us of yet another influence that this band does carry. But then the feat is reversed with As the Black Horde Storms, which basically just accepts black metal as their brand new Dark Lord and Savior, which, hey, you know, that is something that does give this album a lot of unique flavor, not to mention the incorporation of all of these different styles make it feel a little bit more bold, adventurous, and sort of a choose-your-own-adventure, where each and every song feels like it could carry a different modus operandi into it, and then the next one's going to sound very, very different. And then this album concludes with Standing on the Ground of Mammoths, which feels just as big as the song title may actually suggest. And that guitar solo at the end, though, holy freaking smokes. This album rules. It's definitely the highlight of this batch. You've got to scope this one out. We conclude with something that's a little bit out of the ordinary. We have Somali Yacht Club with their album The Sea. What makes this so unique is the fact that this album actually hasn't been released yet. It's not going to be until the latter part of February. However, this is one that has been released on the YouTube platform as well as over on their Bandcamp, so go figure that one out. If you guys really like Foot from a couple of weeks ago, you're going to really dig what these guys do, although they do it with a little bit of a different pacing in mind. They're got a little bit more atmosphere that's infused within their music, and the vocals are sort of scattered about this instead of being something that is really sort of littered throughout. And, you know, it's not something that is kind of a constant. It's one where the musicality and the overall construction is more the shine here on this album. What I really liked about this is the fact that it was able to transition both upward and downward. It was able to deliver something that had a little bit of a harsh tone to it, but really, whenever it dove down and allowed for some of the softer tones to sort of glisten off of those heavier moments, that's where the band really has a ton of talent and where they have a great framework with each and every one of their song constructions. It's almost like they put together this sort of very intricate puzzle of very few pieces, but for some strange reason trying to put that puzzle together anyway, aside from the way in which they did it, just crafted something that sounded like garbage. And they put the puzzle together perfectly on each one of these songs. Overall, it's a little bit of a longer listen than the Foot album. It can be one that is kind of a struggle if this is not your traditional style or your traditional favorite type of heavy metal, but I love how they cascade everything and sort of build that atmosphere. You know, for a group that really is incorporating a little bit more of that sort of psychedelic vision, or in this case more of a post-rock or a post-metal vision, they certainly have put themselves on the radar with this album, I think, and it's only up to the listeners to really discover this and understand that it is truly one that's very worthy of those genre tags. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Again, I wish I could have gotten to everything I wanted to this past weekend. Really, the fact that this is being put up in the middle part of the following week is proof alone that everything else is sort of kicking my tail right now. Dedicating this episode to my cat, Pippin, who just recently had surgery on his eye. That's another reason why things kind of moved a little bit more slowly. For those of you who follow the Facebook page, you know all about that, even those who are on the Twitter. If you have not followed those yet, certainly do so. You can buy a lot of these albums over on the Amazon page. I have links for as many as I can for UK, Canada, and the US customers down there in the description box. So if you liked what you heard through the descriptions that I gave, certainly give these albums a purchase. They are well worth your investment. I am coverkillernation. I don't know if we're going to do these five recently released series thing like every week or anything like that. I highly doubt that we would until after April. This was kind of a one-off thing considering of how many releases that there were and how behind I was. I really wanted to get to a lot more full reviews, but a lot of other things in life sort of needed my attention. So stay tuned for more album reviews as opposed to something like this. But if you like this, there's a lot of episodes in the backlog from 2 years ago and one from last year. You can learn about a lot of other great heavy metal bands that perhaps you didn't know about through those. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you guys next time.